Welcome to the Daily Dawg podcast. Today is episode 50, a big milestone in the life of the Daily Dawg, and I'm glad you could be here. Today is also Thanksgiving Day, so there's lots to be thankful about, and not the least of which is a great matchup this week in the much anticipated big rivalry game. Clean Old-Fashioned Hate renews the 117th edition on Friday, day after tomorrow. Day after today. Friday will be the big game in Mercedes-Benz Stadium at 3:30. One of three back-to-back SEC games dominating the ABC ESPN lineup for the day. And we get the middle game slot. And it's exciting to have the Friday time slot. It's not entirely to ourselves, where we're the only game going on, but it is sort of a premium lineup where it's just our slate of games, one after the other on Friday. There are a few other games out there, and then you get the full slate of games on Saturday. So I am excited that the Georgia Tech game gets featured in this spot, and this is going to be a big game. It's a top 25 matchup for the first time in quite some time. I think I should have recorded this somewhere, but I believe this is the 12th time, maybe all time, that we've met when both teams are ranked, which is pretty sad out of 117 meetings that this will be. Also, what was I going to say about that? And also let me remind you that according to Georgia, this is the 117th meeting. You might see it listed as the 119th meeting, and record books do show that, and Georgia Tech certainly shows that. As we mentioned before on one of our earlier podcasts, Georgia Tech fielded its full varsity team during the World War II era, whereas Georgia, almost their entire significant players team had gone off to the war and was supporting the war effort. And so the Georgia team shut down its varsity program and did continue to have junior varsity and sort of volunteer players step up to play, and they played some exhibition games. They did not consider it. Georgia does not post the varsity record for those years, but Tech claims those victories, and they did make it into the record book because, of course, they're a very powerful team, and Tech was a powerful team in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. So they claim those wins, and no surprise. With those wins, they actually get over the 40-win mark. They read the series as 72, 41, and 5. 72 wins for Georgia, 42 wins for Tech, and 5 ties. Georgia records the series as 72 wins, 39 wins for Tech, and 5 ties. So, listen, today is the debut. I alluded to this before, that we are going to change the format of the show. I've been working for a long time to figure out what sort of an easy way to keep you guys informed of what's going to be on the show, let you pick and choose. Of course, I'd love for you to listen to the entire podcast, recommend the entire podcast to your friends, watch on YouTube video, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And we do also have this podcast is hosted on the webpage. TheDailyDawg.com is a full website that right now mostly just features the podcast for football season. We've been just trying to keep up with the steady stream of content of having these good conversations, fan-to-fan, knowledgeable fan-to-fan interaction about Georgia football and the 2025 football season. So we're coming to the end. This is our last game of the regular season, and I appreciate you being with me the whole time. It's taken me this whole time to find out exactly how this show is going to come together and how I want it to work out. And we're going to try a new format. We're going to go, we're now in what I'm calling the first quarter. So from now on, we're going to take 4 topics and we're going to break them down during 15-minute segments. I'm going to put myself on the timer, and whatever I can get across and convey and we can discuss in 15 minutes, that's what will happen. And then we will stop. There'll be a pause. You'll see a break. If you're watching on the video, the graphic will come up. It'll say first quarter, second quarter, third quarter. This will allow people to know where they are in the show, skip ahead if they want to hear about the next topic. If they don't have time, it'll allow people to share different segments, and maybe eventually, I think I'm going to process it still as one complete video that'll run. It'll be a shade over 60 minutes because we'll do 15-minute quarters, but there'll be what do you call it? There'll be little breaks in between. So probably run about 65 minutes, but you'll know that you can jump in and out of the first quarter, second quarter, third quarter. Maybe eventually I'll be able to break those out and have them separate and be able to offer both, either the 15-minute segments or the full, whichever one you want to work with. So I'm going to jump into the first quarter. The first quarter today is who is Georgia Tech? What is Georgia Tech? And that may seem like a silly topic for a much hated rival, a local rival. Many Georgia fans live in Metro Atlanta, as I do. And so, of course, we are surrounded by, I don't know if we're surrounded by Tech fans. I think I probably have as many Clemson and Tennessee and, trying to think Auburn and Alabama fans around as I have Tech. Although I will say I don't often see, and I've made this complaint before, I often don't see Tech fans take the pride that other teams, and that's one of the great things about living in Metro Atlanta. We have the College Football Hall of Fame here, and I think it makes a lot of sense that it moved here because not only do we have the SEC championship game here, national championship games here, the Peach Bowl, playoff games, you name it. But there is just an amazing culture around college football that surrounds Metro Atlanta. Maybe the biggest college football culture of any major city in the country. Other major cities out there do have college programs, but the Metro Atlanta area just embraces so many fan bases. First and foremost, so much of the growth over the last 35, 40, 50 years in Metro Atlanta has been people moving from other parts of the country. So people, as we are, often long-time family tradition, tribal sort of instincts to our college football allegiances that go back for years, decades, generations, and families. A lot of those come with people to Georgia when they come here. So even though they've now live in Georgia, maybe they grew up and they were, they went to Princeton and they lived in New Jersey and they're Princeton fans, or they're Penn State fans, or they're whatever. And then, of course, across the Southeast, the Southeastern Conference and the ACC Conference both overlap, and the center of their conference, both of those conferences, is essentially Atlanta, where you have teams just outside of Atlanta, a couple hours in every direction. You have Clemson just to the north in South Carolina, of course, Georgia Tech here in town, Georgia just outside of Metro Atlanta. You have Tennessee is within 3 hours drive. You have Alabama and Auburn are within 2.5 and 3.5 hour drive. You have going to the south, it's about 5 to 7 hours, depending on where you are, and you could be in Gainesville, Florida, at the University of Florida. You could get to Tallahassee in the same 5 to 7 hours, depending on where you are in Metro Atlanta. It's not terribly far if you want to get over to LSU, just a day's drive down to Baton Rouge. Mississippi is also just a day's drive, and you have 2 SEC schools out that way. So lots and lots of, again, in the ACC schools, you got North Carolina and Duke just up in the Carolinas. Virginia is not that far away. Many Virginia people swap back and forth between D.C., Maryland, and Metro Atlanta area, some coming from there to here and some going from here to there in their lifetimes. I considered and was really wanted to go to the University of Virginia, actually long before I ended up going to the University of Georgia. So I certainly can relate to that. And I've had friends and people that I know that went to Virginia schools and still ended up living in Virginia area. So anyway, lots and lots of overlap. And with that, the honest truth is I see a lot more of every other kind of fan as far as their colors and flags and school pride out on display than I often see Tech fans. But I did see, I was walking the dog this week around the neighborhood, and I'd never noticed this house before having a Tech flag. In fact, I walked by a house before I get to them that has a USC flag, and not South Carolina, but USC, like the Trojans of Southern Cal. I have Notre Dame fans that live right across the street, Tennessee fans next door, and folks from the Pennsylvania area across the street up above. So, there's a lot of overlap, but Tech fans, my long-standing complaint is that Tech fans are going to be the first in your face if they win this game this weekend. You will not hear about it for hear about it for the rest of this year. But if they lose the game, they're often the first people. They don't put their flags up. They don't wear their Tech gear and pride. You don't see as much Tech logos on their cars and backs of cars and license plates. Just don't see as much claiming it. And, when they lose and when they're on a long losing streak like they are now, having lost 7 in a row to Georgia, they have a tendency to just say, well, you guys, you just a bunch of dumb jocks. All that you care about is football. We're so smart. We're going to own in the world and invent some great technology, and you'll all work for us. And what do we care about football? So, but this year, Tech's got record. Tech has record season ticket sales this year. The crowds have been good at Bobby Dodd Stadium, and sadly, Tech let the fans down this last weekend. They had a big crowd there, a chance to win and you're in the ACC championship, play for the ACC championship, which would have given them a direct path into the playoffs, but of course they lost to Pittsburgh, and so that's the question. Who is this Tech team right now? So historically, what I wanted to start with when we're talking about who is Tech is who are they historically? And I've said this before. Look, I'm looking for Tech to resume its one-time greatness. Tech was one of the great historical teams of all times. In the 40s, 50s, and 60s, they were a dominant team. They claimed 4 national championships in their history, claiming one, I think, in 1917, 1928, 1952, and of course the 1990 national championship that many of us lived through. I was not around for any of the first 3, but I've read about them and I heard about them, and they had some great teams. The current coach, Brent Key, was an offensive lineman at Georgia Tech, and he was an offensive lineman in a great era of Georgia Tech football. He was on the team from 90. He played 43, or he started 43 games. I don't know if he started, but he played in 43 games. I think I read from 1997 to 2000. And that team, 97 team, lost to Georgia 27-24. But the next teams, the 1998, 99, and 2000 teams, were the last Georgia Tech teams to have a 3-game win streak against Georgia. So those are a couple of painful games. When I talk about some of those games in history that stick with me and that I just haven't quite gotten over, one of the ones I've never quite gotten over is that 51-48 overtime loss that we had at Bobby Dodd Stadium. You might remember, those of you old enough might remember, much like the controversial fumble at Auburn this year, we had the controversial overtime, and Jasper Sanks was Georgia's feature running back, and it appeared for all the world that he clearly broke the plane. Unlike the situation with Auburn, I mean, he clearly possessed the ball well over the line, and but he as he punched the ball over, eventually the ball got popped out, and it was ruled that he lost the ball, and Tech recovered it just outside the 1, and so that allowed Georgia Tech to have a chance to win the game with a field goal in overtime. They had a good field goal kicker back then, and in a move you rarely see, one of those coaching moves that seemed a little strange at the time, but it paid off. They actually went for the game-winning field goal from some distance on 3rd down, and it worked because Georgia blocked the field goal. Okay, wasn't just a muffed kick. They actually attempted the kick and we blocked it, but the ball did not cross the line of scrimmage. It was knocked backwards, and Tech recovered the ball. And you rarely see that. Most of the time the ball goes beyond the line of scrimmage, and once it does, the ball is going to go over to the other team. It's essentially as if you kicked it over. And but no, the ball stayed behind the line of scrimmage. Tech recovered the ball, and then they backed them up and made for a long field goal, but they were able to set up again on 4th down and kick the game-winning field goal, break the 48-all tie, and win 51-48. And that was an epic game that went back and forth, and it felt like we had that game won with the Jasper Sanks touchdown that was ultimately ruled a fumble, gave Tech a chance to win the game, and then they go for, you think you've saved your life here in the overtime by blocking, and that's how Larry Munson, I don't remember what his actual call was on that particular game, but I'm sure that's how he would have called it. We've saved our lives here with a block. Let's see what happens. But so we did. We block the kick, and then ultimately they go for they get the ball on 4th down and get a second chance at the kick and win the game. So, listen, my 15-minute timer is running up. I know I took some of the time for this quarter 1 to explain what's going to happen in in the new version of the show, but that's how we're going to do it. We're going to put ourselves on the clock for 4 15-minute segments, and that's what we're going to get done in the Daily Dawg each day. So you know what to count on. You get a 60-minute show broken up into 4 15-minute segments that you can digest as you want and share with others. So we're going to adhere to that. So we're going to go ahead and take a break now. We've talked about a little bit about Brent Key and about Georgia Tech and a little bit about history of Georgia Tech rivalry. We're going to come back in quarter 2, and we're going to continue our history of Georgia Tech. So join us for quarter 2, and then we'll go from there. Thank you so much for listening so far. This is episode 50 of the Daily Dawg, quarter 1. Thank you. Welcome back to the Daily Dawg podcast. This is episode 50. This is the second quarter number 2. So we're in our first ever episode 50, represents our first ever version of breaking up the show into 4 quarters and how fitting that is for football. I didn't think of it because of him, but I do want to give tribute to somebody I admire and have followed for years in the college football world. That would be the Sports Illustrated acclaimed sports writer Pat Forty. I like Pat Forty's columns and followed him and read his stuff for years. And he does do his column in a format very much like this. He has first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter, and puts out his column throughout the week. I was not intending for this to emulate that. In fact, when I was talking with some friends and family about how to improve the podcast and how to make it more predictable for fans, make it something that you guys can count on a little bit, know what's going on, know what the flow is going to be, how long you have to commit, maybe where you can move in and out of the topics, as I'm able to give you better information about what's going to be in each quarter, and even something that you could share better, and maybe eventually even publish the quarters separately and then the whole as a whole, so that there's the most flexibility. That's my goal. We'll see if we can get that up to that. But for now, I'm really just trying to improve the flow of the show and give you something you can count on each day. I'm trying to bring this podcast at least 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Fridays. Sometimes I can maybe get in 4 or 5. Sometimes I don't quite make it, but I do want to bring as much daily content as I can to go with the idea of the Daily Dawg, so that we can have this conversation throughout the year. And again, we're going to keep going. This is not just a football season podcast. We will reflect on other aspects of Georgia athletics. I do want to give a shout out to the men's basketball team, which is off to a good start again this season. They're 6-1 now. They lost a game on Sunday to Clemson in the final, or a bracket of a final of a tournament they were playing. They won the first game against Xavier, and they were very competitive, ended up in overtime against Clemson, couldn't quite pull the game out, lost their first game of the year, but played nicely against an ACC team that usually competes well in the national rankings for college basketball. And, Clemson's not one of the heavyweights like Duke or North Carolina in the ACC, but they pull their weight from time to time. So anyway, I just want to say, Coach White has got the team playing well, and he's, of course, this era of college basketball, you're rebuilding the team every year, it seems like, there's 1 or 2 fresh faces. Blue Kane is still a key member of the team, and he was a personality from last year's, but a lot of the people that you know and recognize from last year's team are gone, and you got a whole new cast of guys in there, but they start off the season as sort of a high-flying, high-scoring team, not a ton of defense, but they seem to be exciting and fun to watch so far, and really enthused about how well the support for Georgia basketball is going and how the direction of that program is going. When it's not football season anymore, or when we get our long break, we will have at some point a couple weeks of break in between game action while we're waiting for whatever our fate is in the postseason. And so we'll have a chance to reflect a little bit more on basketball and some other things about Georgia and about Georgia athletics. So, but now what we're going to do is get quarter 2 is to wrap up. I took a big chunk of quarter 1 to talk about the new podcast in what we're doing. So we're going to get back in here in quarter two and say, who is Georgia Tech? We're talking about the history of Georgia Tech, what kind of program they are. I've been calling all week and last week and throughout the season, I've been saying, look, I want to see Georgia Tech be an undefeated team and a top 5 team when they play us. Again, it's sort of the point of view I'm expressing here is, look, we're going to play this Power 5, Power 4 conference opponent every year because this is our in-state rival. They're an out-of-conference game. We're going to 9 conference games starting in the future. And so with the new 9-game schedule, now we're only going to have 3 out-of-conference games, and this game is going to get a dedicated spot every year. So that means if we want to play one of those kickoff classics or a fun home and home with another big-time team like we've had scheduled in the past, and we maybe have scheduled coming up in the future if some of these hold and survive the new scheduling, then you're going to get down to where maybe you only play one game like we saw last week against Marshall in the season, or not Marshall, we saw Marshall at the beginning of the season, Charlotte last week. So maybe there's only going to be room for 1 or 2 of those games. If you play a compelling kickoff game, you play an out-of-conference game against Georgia Tech, and then you have your 9-game SEC schedule. So these patsy games and cupcake games may become a thing of the past, but if we're going to play Georgia Tech every year, and we're going to, I'm not calling for an end to this rivalry. That I'm a big fan of history, and this is one of the older rivalries. It's not the oldest. Auburn, Georgia, as we talked about, was one of the oldest rivalries in the country, and you start to get into a bunch of different things, but Georgia and Georgia Tech have been playing football against each other since 1893, and there's been a lot of hate and animosity, and we're going to talk a little bit about that history right now. So I was starting to talk about Brent Key as we wrapped up the first quarter and saying, look, Coach Key he was an offensive lineman in one of the heyday times in recent memory of Georgia Tech. He was on the team in 1987 through 2000. He's an offensive lineman. And so he was on a team that went 3-1 against Georgia. And he's one of a handful of Georgia Tech players who are around who can say they went 3-1 against Georgia. You had to be on that team. Nobody else did. Nobody else won 3 games. There's no other team that won 3 games. There was another 2014, 15, and 16. Tech won 2 out of 3, but Georgia won the games on all sides of that. So any of those 4 or 5 games in there, the most you could say is that Tech won 2 and Georgia won 2. So Brett Key can remember Georgia Tech being not just a good team and not just competitive against Georgia, but winning 3 out of 4 games against Georgia. That's his experience as a player. So this 0-4 as a coach experience, I think, is very hard for him, and you could see that in the emotion at the end of the game last year. And I respect that. I love to see a guy who lives and bleeds and dies for his school. You know, this is his school, and he has really solidified the program. I mean, I am impressed with what he's done. I'm impressed with what he's brought to the table and how the team is playing. And they certainly are playing with a lot of energy. They certainly are playing I think they're punching above their weight. And, the thing he's going to have to do is continue to develop, figuring out how to get more talent. That may be a combination of Tech figuring out how to raise more money so they can be a bigger player in NIL, and they can have the payments to players available to pay and be competitive in that arena. And he's going to have to, continue to upgrade the recruiting in the area. There's certainly talent, even if you don't go head-to-head with Georgia and Alabama and Tennessee and Auburn for the elite of the elite. There's still a lot of talent to be had there, and he has done a good job picking up some players in the metro Atlanta area. There's certainly a lot to see. As a player, those teams that he was on, the 97 team went 7-5, the 98 team went 10-2, the 99 team went 8-4, and the 2000 team went 9-3. And again, those last 3 teams beat Georgia. All of those teams finished number 9 in the country. That 10-2 1998 team finished number 9 in the country. The 99 team was 20th, and the 2000 team finished 17th. So not only was he on a team that was able to beat Georgia, it wasn't like they were just had a lucky streak against their in-state rival, but weren't necessarily that good. They were a top. They won 10 games one of those years. They were winning 9 and 8 and 10 games, and they were a perennial top 25 team, finishing those seasons in the top 25. The Paul Johnson era before and it, was an era, and it didn't go straight from Brent Keita. There was Jeff Collins was in there, but before that it was Paul Johnson. Paul Johnson had that triple option offense going and was coach for about 11 years, and he had that sort of arrogant attitude, and he was a good coach, and he did coach Georgia Tech to 2 11-win seasons, but he also coached them to a couple 3-win seasons, or at least 1 3-win season, and a few other mediocre seasons. They were competitive, but they were not able to get through that glass ceiling. They were kind of a 8-4, 7-5 kind of team as far as the regular season goes, most of the time, with a few better years. But Georgia Tech historically is one of the great. They, again, like I said, they've claimed 4 national championships of all time. They're number 20th in wins of all time, and they have 777 wins. So they're number 20th on the all-time wins list. So there's some history there. And don't forget, you might have heard of this guy, John Heisman, that they named his trophy after, that goes supposedly one of the biggest honors in the entire sport of college football. John Heisman coached for what was it? Let me see. I wrote it down. John, how much? 16 seasons at Georgia Tech. He was 102, 28, and 7, a 764 winning percentage, and claimed at least 1 national championship in that era. So, and John Heisman was part of those teams. You might have heard an answer to a trivia question if you haven't heard it before. What's the biggest blowout ever? What's the biggest score all time in the history, or what's the worst beatdown in the history of college football? That belongs to Georgia Tech. They forced Cumberland College, who had lost their team or didn't really have a full varsity team, but they grabbed some guys and came out and played. They forced Cumberland to adhere to a contract to play the game. And Cumberland was disbanding, I guess, their football team, but they forced them to play them in 1916, I think it was. And they ran out there, and the 1916 team, and they beat them 222 to nothing. 222 to nothing. That's hard to. I mean, we tend to think of that old era of college football, that turn of the century era, as 3 yards or 2 yards in a cloud of dust. But that was some offense, and I've done this math before. Let me do it again. 222 points over 60 minutes of football. That's 3.7 points a minute. That's a touchdown every other minute. That's every 2 minutes in the game you scored a touchdown. I just always try to imagine what that would have been like, if there's a radio or a TV broadcast of the call. I assume it goes something along the lines of, Georgia Tech's kicking off, having just scored a touchdown and now up 50 to nothing. So they kick off the ball, and Cumberland muffs the punt, and Georgia Tech picks it up and runs it in the end zone, and they score again. It's another touchdown, and now it's 56 to nothing pending the extra point. I figured it just must have gone like that, and then they're like, okay, now up 57 to nothing. Georgia Tech kicks off again, and Cumberland fields the punt cleanly this time, and they'll send out the offense. The offense comes out, and they run a play, and he fumbles the ball. Georgia Tech picks it up, and they've got the ball now down back on the Cumberland 2-yard line. Okay, now Tech has the ball, and first play for scrimmage after the fumble, and Tech's in the end zone, and it's a touchdown. I mean, it must have been like that. That must have been how that game flowed. 222, and I'm pretty sure there was a mercy rule invoked in there. I mean, I don't think they necessarily played the full 60 minutes. So, and Tech of that era, and the Heisman era, was like that, by the way. They had, I noticed looking through the annals of history, in 1918, they had 3 games that they beat teams by scoring over 100 points. In fact, Cumberland College, again, even in that era, they were getting ready to disband their football team. So it's not like they were a great program. But so it's kind of crazy the way that got on the record books, 227. But in 1918, a year after Georgia Tech won the national championship with their 1917 team under John Heisman, and John Heisman's last season would be 1919. In 1918, Heisman coaches a team, and they beat NC State 128 to nothing. NC State. I mean, that's not a nothing school. I mean, I don't know where the state of NC State football was in 1919, or 1918, but I mean, that's a legitimate program, right? So Bobby Dodd, took over. Bobby Dodd was the most successful coach in the history of Tech football. He had a 165, 64, and 8 record, and he helped dominate. He didn't dominate the Georgia series, but when Vince Dooley took over the coaching in 1966 for Georgia, the record with Georgia Tech was like 27, 26, and however many ties or whatever. So it was about an even series. So Vince Dooley goes 19-6 in his career and helps stretch out this big lead where we have now, regardless of which record you look at, where we have 72 wins and they have 41 or 39, whichever you want to call it, but still a sizable lead in the series. Although Tech does have the only 8-game winning streak in the series back in that 1940s, 1950s era under Bobby Dodd, and it would be great if we could win. We've had at least two 7-game win streaks and a 5-game win streak and a couple others in the last 20, 30 years. In fact, in my time, since I was a freshman, in my time, we are 27-8 against Georgia Tech. So we lost the first two, my first two seasons. As a fan, all I knew was that we lost to Tech, but then we rattled off 7 in a row, and then we lost 3 in a row, and then we rattled off another 7 in a row, and then lost 1, and then 5 in a row, and lost 1, and then won 1 and lost 1, and now we're back on the 7 in a row. So if we can win on Friday, we can get to 8 wins in a row, and we can claim another piece of the history in the Georgia Tech series in the favor of Georgia. Not that we're not fairly dominant in that history, but Tech's great era of the 50s and 40s, 50s, and 60s definitely made it was more competitive in that time. So that's a little bit about the coaches. That's a little bit about Brent Key and who he was and their record and where they've been. That's going to wrap up the second quarter. So what we're going to do is we're going to come back in the third quarter and we're going to talk about what Georgia Tech's season has been like. We'll do a little bit of a season review to sort of set up breaking down the game for our podcast tomorrow on Friday, just ahead of the game. The Friday morning podcast will have the breakdown and the predictions of the game. So this has been quarter 2 of episode 50 of the Daily Dawg podcast, where we have looked at who is Georgia Tech, who are their coaches, and who were they in history. So join us for quarter 3, where we break down the 2025 Georgia Tech season so we can get a little sense of what's going to happen coming up. Thank you so much for joining us, and come back for the third quarter. Thank you so much, and go Dogs. Welcome back to the Daily Dawg. It is the third quarter, quarter number 3. This is episode 50, your Thursday Thanksgiving Day podcast, gearing up and getting ready for the big game of Clean Old Fashioned Hate, the 117th edition of Clean Old Fashioned Hate, which is going to take place this year at Mercedes-Benz Stadium in downtown Atlanta. Georgia Tech having sold the rights to their home game for $10 million to, I'm not exactly clear, I guess it was the MBS group itself or somebody who runs the stadium, but some entity connected with Mercedes-Benz Stadium has paid $10 million to Georgia Tech. I don't know the exact figures, but my understanding is that a team might clear in the neighborhood of $2 to $10 million for a home game. Depends on who you are. Tech probably does not clear that kind of level. Their Bobby Dodd Stadium seats about 55,000 people, and it's usually not sold out. I'm not trying to rip on Georgia Tech, just saying that's what it is. And so on gate receipts alone, getting a $10 million guarantee is probably at least equivalent to the best home game, concession and parking and season ticket and anything they could possibly hope for out of the best home game ever. $10 million probably exceeds that, probably by a couple few million dollars. And as we were saying in quarter 2, before halftime there, that Georgia Tech it needs funding. They are renovating their football operations. They are trying to make a commitment to winning. They've had a change. They had an athletic director who came over from Alabama, and then he's moved on to Michigan State. Maybe that's considered an upgrade, but in my mind, I don't know why you'd want to go to Michigan State. I would have stayed and kept building at Georgia Tech, but he's moved on. They have a new athletic director now, and but they're continuing to try to revamp things there at Georgia Tech and get things going, but they do face some financial trouble. The ACC does not pay out the kind of money that the SEC or the Big Ten pays out, and they're in an antiquated TV contract, and Georgia Tech does not generate a huge amount of excess revenue in other places. So revenue stream is an issue for them to be competitive for NIL and payments for players, and I certainly don't begrudge them. I mentioned this before. I think it's actually, a lot of people want to laugh, and especially if Georgia wins the game, and there's a ton of, let's say it ends up being 70-30 Georgia crowd at Mercedes-Benz Stadium on Friday, and Georgia wins the game convincingly. There's a lot of people that are going to look at Tech's decision to sell this home game and say they made a big mistake. Seth Emerson in The Athletic, who used to be the Georgia beat writer, but now covers a lot of just SEC in general for The Athletic. He had a nice article about this, and there was some good information in there. Long story short, I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I think Tech actually probably did a good job for their program. I mean, $10 million is a huge payday. Again, bigger guarantee than they're going to get elsewhere, and a chance to raise revenue like this. And let's face facts. I mean, most of the last several games, Georgia Tech has not beaten Georgia at Bobby Dodd Stadium. The last wins Georgia Tech has recorded in the series have all been in Athens. Georgia Tech hasn't beaten Georgia Tech at Bobby Dodd Stadium since that 3-game win streak I was referencing that Brent Key was a part of as a player. The 99 game, the middle game of those 3 games, so it was in Athens and Bobby Dodd and then Athens, that 3-game win streak that Georgia Tech had in 89, 99, and 2000. And that 99 game was the last time Georgia Tech has beaten Georgia in Bobby Dodd Stadium. So, I mean, that spans, how many games is that now? That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 or more games. So, I mean, 99 sounds like a long time, but of course you only play every other year. And then Georgia Tech opted out of the game during COVID, breaking a longstanding tradition. I'm still very frustrated with them about that. Obviously, a lot of the ideas and things, especially relative to outdoor football games, the idea that there were problems of outdoor football games being an area where people should be limited and whatnot, turned out to be no big deal. There wasn't huge epidemics that spiraled out of control because people went to a big outdoor football game. And so teams not playing each other and fans not coming to games and everything, that all turned out to be, I think, and I don't want to get into a big political statement about it. I'm just talking literally the football component of it. I think we could see that there was little to no problem in these big outdoor stadium gatherings. The later it went on in the COVID situation and canceling the games and destroying history and changing everybody's schedule just all seemed to be kind of silly. I guess I'm just glad that we at least had football that season. We probably came very close to having no football for no good reason. But listen, let's get back. Quarter number 3 is supposed to be about reviewing Georgia Tech's season this year. So we talked about some of their history. We haven't covered all of their history, but we've talked about some of their history. And I know a lot of Georgia fans are probably deeply familiar, like I said, living in and amongst Georgia Tech fans and the Georgia Tech campus itself in and around Metro Atlanta. People who live here and interact, go downtown. You get a lot of opportunity to be a part of the tech community just around you. And and it's a program with a good history, and campus is becoming much bigger and better place. The things that have happened, the Fifth Avenue Bridge, the connecting into Midtown, the new development over there, and just the growth of Midtown and in-town Atlanta, and just the thriving in-town Atlanta residential community has just really changed the situation for Georgia Tech. And so it's becoming a much more desirable school. It's in a fun and exciting location, and they're getting a broader base of students than they ever had before. And they're getting the opportunity to, really grow from that. And so there's no reason why they can't take advantage of some of the things. They just going to have to figure out how to develop revenue. And so selling off this game, it may look like a mistake, but I don't think so. I think the $10 million was worth it, because what I was going to say is, you go back and you look at the games, Georgia's been winning since The last time Tech won at home was 1999. Georgia's won 10, 12, 11, whatever it is in a row. And Georgia feels very comfortable. And Georgia fans routinely who live in Metro Atlanta especially find it easier and cheaper sometimes to get a hold of tickets, Tech tickets, buy ticket. Even it's often cheaper the way Georgia ticket prices can go to buy a Tech season ticket package if you live here in Atlanta and just not go to the other home games and just go to the Georgia game. And Tech's been aware of that for years, and they've come up with creative ways to sell their ticket packages to get maximum money out of the Georgia game, knowing that a lot of those are going to end up in the hands of Georgia fans. And you see that when the game kicks off, you go back and you look around and you see that the anywhere from 2/3 to half of the stadium has been at least 40% or more for most of the last several games played at Bobby Dodd Stadium have been red in the stands. So, actually Georgia Tech has a better chance to have more Georgia Tech fans in the stands, even if they're still outnumbered by Georgia fans at Mercedes-Benz Stadium on Friday. They still have a chance to have more actual Tech fans in the stands, in the seats, than they typically do at Bobby Dodd Stadium. So I think it's a reasonable opportunity. And I've got a Q4 suggestion. I almost hate to do it. I've been thinking about it, like, should I give them suggestions? And I don't know that anybody's going to hear this. I don't know that anybody's going to do what I think is a great idea. But I think I have what is a great idea that should become a part of the history or tradition of this game if they continue to sell off this game. Now, I don't know if the entities are going to find that they made enough money on this to make it worth it and think this was a good idea going forward, but we'll find out. So let's jump back into who is Georgia Tech this season. Georgia Tech, as you know, has been as high, has been ranked this season, which you can't always say that, but this has been a great year for Georgia Tech. So far on the season, they are, let's take a look here. Again, they're 9-2. They start off the season, of course, unranked, but they jumped into the rankings at number 18. They worked their way all the way up to number 7. They didn't play beautifully. They survived a game after getting all the way up to number 7, so they lost a spot and went down to number 8, and then they lost the first of the 2 of 3 games that they've lost. They've lost 2 of their last 3 to NC State and then to Pittsburgh last weekend, and that has dropped them all the way down to just clinging on to the bottom of the rankings at number 23. And this is kind of a high watermark so far for the Brent Key era. Brent Key has been good. He took over midseason for Jeff Collins 4 seasons ago. He has had a pair of 7 and 6 seasons, and now he's taking a big step up. He's already got 9 wins on the table. So regardless of what happens here, this has been the most successful season in Tech history in the last 4, 5, 6, 10 years. In fact, let's just go back here to take a look at this. Let's go back here. I was going to say, so in the last time Georgia Tech finished in the top 25 was the 2014 season, when they finished the season ranked 11th, and they were 11-3 that year and won the Orange Bowl. And that was one of Paul Johnson's very good years, one of his 2 best years as coach. So, it's been a while since they've been here. They won 9 games in 2016, still under Paul Johnson, and then this would be the first time they've won more than 7 since that 2016 season. So this is a nice high watermark. It's been a good season so far, but it has been a little empty calories, and we may have found that the team has hit a little bit of the proverbial glass ceiling. We look at now how the season's developed. They played Colorado in Colorado to start the season. We had no idea what Colorado would be, but they turned out not to be a very good team. Then they beat Gardner-Webb at home. That's a gimme. The big turning point that really launched their season was a 24-21 win against then number 12 Clemson. Clemson, of course, is now, I don't know, I think they're either 5 or 6 or maybe 6 and 5. They're somewhere right around that, and certainly unranked. So Clemson did not turn out to be the number 12 team in the country. But at the time, it seemed like a big deal that Tech was able to win that game at home and springboard some momentum. Then they had an out-of-conference game against Temple. They won fairly easily. Then they had their big shock moment against Wake Forest, and they just snuck out of the Wake Forest game with a win 30-29, and probably should have lost that game. They beat Virginia Tech 35-20. Then they played Duke at Duke, and they won that one pretty handily, 27-18. Duke is supposed to be a pretty good team this year, but not as good as people were hoping. Syracuse, who had a nice run last year under Fran Brown, has lost all of their quarterbacks and just really struggling this year. They've had a lot of injuries. Tech beat them handily, 41-16, but then they went on the road against North Carolina State, and that's when the problem started. And their defense has just completely collapsed. They're giving up over 400 yards a game for the season, and they're giving up that. They've had a couple games in the last two of the last three where they've given up over 500 yards. So while Tech came into last weekend in number one in terms of yardage in the country and offensive production, they're still among the top 10, though they lost a little bit of mojo there. But they did lose to NC State 48-36. They turned around and barely beat Boston College, albeit on the road, but Boston College is not a very good team, so that was not very convincing. And then they lost to Pitt at home 42-28. And again, just weren't able to stop Pitt. Their defense wasn't able to do much of anything. So they're kind of limping into this game, but overall, the big picture is they're 9-2. This is their most successful season if they don't win another game. If they lose to Georgia and then get into a bowl game and lose that game and finish 9-4, this is still going to be a high water mark for the last couple of years. It would be nice to see them be able to build the momentum. Certainly not win this game, but I'd like to see them get clobbered by Georgia in Mercedes-Benz Stadium on Friday, and then turn around and get a decent bowl game since the playoffs and the ACC championship is off the table, and go on and win their bowl game this year. They lost the bowl game last year, so if they can win their bowl game, they could get still a 10-3 season. And when everything shakes out, they may be back in the bottom of that top 25 with a 10-win season. So that would be a nice step up, to go from 7-6 and unranked to 10-3 and ranked. But you can see by going through those games, Colorado, Gardner-Webb, this year's Clemson team, Temple, Wake Forest, Virginia Tech, Duke, Syracuse, NC State, Boston College, Pitt. As a Georgia fan, that's a schedule that I think you look at and you say, I'd take that. I feel like Tech is 9-2 against that schedule, and that should tell you something about Tech, because I feel pretty confident, even the way Georgia has struggled a little bit early in this season, Georgia should be, and comparatively, if you look at how Georgia's done in the games, we've only lost the one game to Alabama. Alabama is by far vastly better than any team on that schedule, better than any three teams on that schedule. So Georgia would probably be 11-0 at this point against Georgia Tech's schedule. So Georgia Tech, I think that they got to that 9 wins and that the 8 wins and undefeated and ranked number 7 in the country. But I think it's worth noting that, a lot of that had to do with their schedule, and sometimes that's just how it works out. But they maximized their schedule. They played well. They played with heart and energy. And the center of the team has really been Haynes King, who probably deserves some Heisman love. Much like Gunnar Stockton, he is gutsy, he is hard-nosed, and he has really been getting it done in all phases of the game for Georgia Tech. The downside for him, I think, is that he is probably a little bit too much of the offense. He's their leading rusher, obviously their leading passer. Passing game is better than you might think. He's not known as a great passer and more of an impressive runner, but the passing game has 12 different receivers that have over 100 yards on the season. But and though they have a couple running backs that are pretty well thought of, Haynes King is still leading the team in rushing, and that's probably putting a little bit too much on Haynes King. So, well, listen, we're at the end now of quarter number 3, and so that is our quick look at the Georgia Tech recap of Georgia Tech season. We're going to come back and have some final thoughts about Georgia Tech and Georgia heading into the game. The next podcast that will come out on Friday morning will be the one that we break down the game and have our final predictions and go through our usual steps on that. But join us for quarter 4, fourth quarter. I've got a suggestion and something that I think might spice up the way this rivalry is going in the future, especially if there's any interest in keeping this game at Mercedes-Benz Stadium in the future when it comes to Atlanta. So join us back for the fourth quarter. Go Dogs. Welcome back for the fourth quarter of the Daily Dawg podcast. This is episode 50. This is your Thursday Thanksgiving Day podcast. And like I said, this is the fourth quarter. We now do the show in 4 segments. Being a football show or football-oriented show or sports athletic-oriented show, why not go quarters? I mentioned that while I didn't, when I thought of the idea and talked it out with family and friends, how to give fans and listeners a better sense of exactly what the timing of the show is going to be, what they can expect to listen to, whether they're exercising, whether they're listening in their car, in their commute, whether it's part of their walk or just being at home, or however you listen to the podcast, watch the podcast on video. I want to make it a little more uniform. I want to get in our topics a little more tidy and on time and give you guys a sense of what you can expect and not just have you being expected to jump in sometimes for an hour, sometimes 2 hours. We've kind of ranged all over the place, be a little bit more focused. So we're doing it in quarters, first, second, third, and fourth quarter. So this is fourth quarter. I reserve the right once in a while. Maybe we have to go to overtime. My wife made that suggestion. She said, look, if you're a little bit, you got a little bit more to say, then maybe you just have to go to overtime. Sometimes games go to overtime. I don't think today will be an overtime game. We got plenty. We're saving our breakdown of the game, the big game, the clean old-fashioned hate rivalry on Friday at 3:30 at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. We're saving that breakdown for Friday morning's podcast. So we'll put that together tomorrow after Thanksgiving festivities, and we'll have it ready for Friday morning, hopefully so you get it first thing. Those have been a little slower on game day, but we're improving our processes, and also I think this quarter system will help. I'm thinking about, I'd like to be able to publish the quarters independently and together as a group, which I know when I listen to other people's podcasts, I like to listen when I'm working out. That's one of the few times I have a chance. When I'm working, I really can't pay attention and follow a podcast. I can listen to music some, but I'm in and out of concentration and being on the phone too much and just not available to keep up with a podcast and stop and start it. I can put streaming on music on all day. When I go for a walk, when I go run, when I exercise, when I'm working out at the gym, that's a great time to listen to a podcast. And for me, that's where I've been trying to emulate the idea. I always feel like something between a 45-minute and a 60-minute podcast works great for me because I can follow the whole podcast in one workout. I don't have to carry it over into another workout. There's some podcasts I've listened to that I like, not necessarily about football, but I've listened some to big movie fans. So I've listened some to Bill Simmons and his gang do the rewatchables where they talk about movies and which ones, what makes them rewatchable. And some of those have gone on for an hour and a half, 2-3 hours. So, and of course, a lot of people put together long podcasts, but I think it's, especially with the game coming every week in the football season, we're about to hit a sort of a lull, one way or the other. If we make it into the SEC championship game, of course, we won't have a lull. We'll be back for a 13th game in a row, or not in a row, but sort of the 13th game of the season, before then finding out our playoff fate, our playoff fate. So, we'll have to see. And tomorrow, the Egg Bowl, I think, is tomorrow. If I've got that right, I guess I should look that up and make sure who's playing who this week. But I think we've got, let me see here. I just want to see. Let's see. Ole Miss they're playing, is that right? Tomorrow at noon. They're the noon game. The Egg Bowl is the noon game. Oh, that's fun. I don't think I realized that. It sure is. Okay. So you got tomorrow is it's going to be an SEC slate tomorrow. So, and a lot about what's going to happen in the SEC is going to be answered tomorrow. Not so much by us. We're in the clubhouse at 7-1. We've posted the high water mark at the moment. So we're just waiting to see what happens. Obviously, Texas A&M is undefeated. Alabama also has one conference loss. Ole Miss has one conference loss, but everybody else still has a conference game to play. We are done. We're 7-1, so we are finished with the conference season, conference record, our conference schedule this season, and we have we got the sort of the most we got the best record. That's just like in golf. When you may not have, there may be guys out on the course who have a lower, you could maybe post a 68, right, in golf, and you're in the clubhouse with a 68. Maybe there's a guy out on the course who's shooting a 60 or on pace to shoot a 65. So your 68 was 4 under, and this guy is maybe 7 or 8 under or 6 under or whatever. But again, he's not done yet. So by the time he gets to his last holes, he may have a couple bogeys and he may finish with a 69. So sometimes being being the clubhouse leader is the way to go. We could end up, as the first place team. If Alabama and Texas A&M were to lose, technically we would end up as the first place team in the SEC, because Alabama would drop to 2 losses. They had beaten us, but they would fall out of the head-to-head competition. If Ole Miss wins the Egg Bowl and Texas A&M loses to Texas, then Texas A&M, Ole Miss, and Georgia would all end up with 1 loss, and that we would not all have played each other because A&M had not played either Ole Miss or Georgia, so they wouldn't be able to look at any head-to-head. So we'd go to that cumulative conference record. What's the cumulative record of your opponents? And in that scenario, with Alabama out, having lost the Iron Bowl, Ole Miss having won the Egg Bowl, Texas A&M having lost to Texas, then you'd have the 3-7 win teams, and we would have the best cumulative record of our opponents, and so we would technically be the first place team. And then in that scenario, it would actually be Ole Miss would be the team who would play us, because they would have the second best record. Texas A&M, as we highlighted in an earlier podcast, has a shockingly bad SEC record. Somehow they managed. I made the point that they haven't played. You have sort of 4 top 10 teams in the SEC right now. You got Texas A&M at 3rd. You got Georgia at 4th. You got Ole Miss keeps bouncing around depending on the rankings the last few weeks between 5th, 6th, and 7th. And then you got Alabama is. Alabama and Ole Miss is 7th right now, and then you got Alabama at 10. So you got these 4 top 10 teams. Well, Texas A&M has managed to get through the season to this point. They got Texas game tomorrow, but they've managed to get through the season to this point without having played either of those other top 10 teams. They didn't play us. They didn't play Alabama. They didn't play Ole Miss. So they have had an easier schedule. And somebody pointed out, I didn't double check this, but I heard somebody say, I think on another radio show or podcast, that Texas A&M has not played any of the top 7 teams in the SEC. So Texas A&M is having a nice season, but if we're being honest, I think we have to admit that they're having a season a little bit reminiscent of last year's Indiana team that got a lot of flack, not because they did anything wrong. It's not their fault. They can only play the schedule that's in front of them. And when you're signed up to be in a Big Ten, you think, hey, we're going to play some top 25 Big Ten teams. Well, that really didn't happen for Indiana last year, except for the Ohio State game, which they pretty much got beat down. So the perception at the end of the year was Indiana's 11-1, and they were a top 10 team, and they get into the playoff, but they kind of looked like empty calories. When you looked at it, they hadn't played any. They had the one game against a top level Big Ten team, and that was Ohio State, and Ohio State beat them pretty thoroughly. Now, Ohio State beats a lot of people pretty thoroughly, so it didn't exactly, just like when we beat a lot of teams pretty thoroughly, it doesn't exactly count teams out. You see, we didn't beat Ole Miss thoroughly. It was a 1-score game ultimately, although statistically, as I've mentioned before, we did pretty well against Ole Miss, but that Ole Miss managed to not really lose much ground at all, having come to Athens and played a good game but lost. And Texas did fall from its number 10 ranking back down into the low teens, or I guess you actually call it the high teens. I think of it as low as in a not great ranking, but technically that's a high teens. But they have climbed their way back up. I think they're back up to number 16 now. They were down around 18, 19, or 20 after losing to us, but now they're back up to 16. And the perception is that Texas is still a top 16 team. That's pretty good, right? Even though they have the 3 losses, and even though they got pretty summarily beat down by Georgia in that 21-point fourth quarter. So there's still a lot of scenarios there where we can be looking at getting into the SEC championship game, and some of those should play out tomorrow, at least a couple of the big pieces of the puzzle. Ole Miss, if you're wondering what to root for, if you want to be in the SEC championship game, and I know I've mentioned, look, I think we should be. I think we want to win an SEC championship. I think we want to, if we get a rematch against Alabama, that'd be a great opportunity, and I think we want to take control of our destiny as opposed to just, even though it looks like we're in a good for the second week in a row, we're sitting in that 4th seed, that last of the buys. I don't know that we're going to survive that if we don't, or to stay there if we don't play in the SEC championship game, because the conference championship games are going to give some teams some opportunities to juggle those top teams, and we've already seen a willingness for results to cause some shuffling. Ole Miss got bounced back down after Oregon. Oregon was trailing the Ole Miss, Texas Tech, and Oregon triumvirate. Oregon was at the bottom of that, and the problem for them was, while they played impressively, their statistics are excellent on the season, they had not beaten any team in the top 25, or any team that was really even a good team so far this season. They played Indiana, who is a good team, and they lost. They played Indiana at home. They lost by 10, and frankly, that score could have been a little bit higher. Indiana didn't take it easy on them. It just, the way things flowed, it could have been a little bit worse than it was, more than a 10-point victory. Indiana seemed to comfortably have that game in control down the stretch. So for Oregon, they were a one-loss team with an impressive resume as far as their stats and the way they look on paper and their overall talent, but really nothing to show, nothing that anybody could point at and say, well, that shows that they're really a good team. So they finally go out this last week and they beat USC, Southern Cal, who by metrics, and by that metric I've been working on and telling you I've been developing my own little power stat metric. By my power stat metric, USC is a surprisingly good team, probably a top 15, top 18 team. So maybe even a top 10 team, depending on how you look at it. So coming into last weekend, and Oregon was able to beat them pretty convincingly. So that result was really the only thing that changed in this week's playoff rankings. And it's one of the reasons I didn't go any deeper in the playoff. Really not much has changed since I last had my piece about how I would rank the playoff teams. I don't think I would change hardly anything. I mean, obviously Georgia Tech is not, they were 16th in my playoff rankings and they got bounced out after the loss to Pitt, but that didn't put them in a playoff position anyway. I would not have had Oregon just because they beat USC and recorded their first top 25 win of the season. I would not have had them jump over Ole Miss and Texas Tech. I think Ole Miss and Texas Tech still have better resumes. So, but there is some fluidity there, and the college football playoff committee has shown some willingness to move around a little bit like that. So I think that puts us in a situation where if we don't play in the SEC championship game, some teams that put up some impressive showings on a championship weekend might have the opportunity to jump us and bump us back to one of the non-bye teams, probably fifth at this point if nothing else changed. And if we beat Tech and it's a good win and we finish 11-1 and people are consistently or feel like we're still on that upward trajectory where it looks like we're peaking, then I think the worst that you could see us end up in is probably fifth, which means that we would probably get the group of five home playoff game in December against a group of five team, which right now is probably Tulane, according to the projections. So, and I think that would be exciting. Again, I'm happy with that. I would rather play in the SEC championship. I'd rather win the SEC championship, add that to our resume, take control of our rankings, take control of our situation. I'm not sure I'm in love with having the bye. I do think it will, if it works the other way, I'm good with that too, because it's going to be a lot of fun to have a December home playoff game in Sanford Stadium, and it's going to be fun to have it be a game that we can more or less go and celebrate this team for what we know this time would be the last game in Sanford Stadium of the season. We can watch them win and move on to the next round of the playoffs and give them a good send-off. So, I've been thinking about it, and here's where I'm going to close today. I think in many ways, and as I've been pointing out, look, I think Tech, it makes sense for them to sell off this game, or for them to have their game against Georgia, their home game, not be at Bobby Dodd Stadium at Grant Field, because Georgia usually takes over that game, and it's a little embarrassing for them. And look, they want to make the money, and they're happy to sell tickets to Georgia fans if that's what it takes. They need the money, but it's going to look better where the game appears to be a neutral site game, even though it's a home game for Georgia Tech. It's going to look funny to go in there and not see both teams with the writing in the end zone, but to see Georgia Tech, emblazoned because it's their home game, but it's in MBS. But if MBS or somebody was willing to keep paying Tech a competitive fee to take that game, I think Tech should consider selling the game routinely so that the Georgia Tech game, when it's in Atlanta, can be held in a stadium befitting of the audience that wants to show up. And it gives more opportunity for more Tech fans to actually get in the game. And the Georgia fans that are going to overwhelm and come to the game are going to be there too. And it will make for a great atmosphere. And what I think they could do to help build that tradition. I keep talking about how this should be one of the great rivalries in sports. There's so much hate. There's so much passion. There's so much history here. If Georgia Tech can build their traditions. Now, what do they lose by not having the game at home? Well, they lose that atmosphere, and they are building a better atmosphere on campus, and they're getting more excitement, more enthusiasm. So you miss the tailgate on campus, and you miss that whole environment. But I think what I would do is I would organize, if I was Tech, I would have the home tailgate still on campus. I would encourage everybody to be there. I'd make it welcoming. I'd have bands. I'd have whatever it takes, food trucks, just, help make it easier to make people have a great time at Georgia Tech. And then what I would do is I would rally a fan parade, a march to the stadium. They should go in mass they should do their tailgate at Georgia Tech, because it's a Georgia Tech home game. And then they should move in mass through the city. They should work with the city to cooperate a situation where they can maybe block off a route and create an opportunity where fans can walk. And I think they could get buses and flatbed trucks and various types of trucks or whatever, and safely maybe move people, have one half of the road blocked off going to the stadium for trucks and buses and, official transport shuttles or something that help move people down the thing. And other people want to walk along the way. Make it a parade. They should march on Mercedes-Benz Stadium from the Georgia Tech campus. They should be like, hey, we're going to take our home game over there. It's going to be a big event. We're going to do our tailgate, and we're going to march in with the band, with the fans. We're going to bring everybody in. We're just going to arrive in a big event at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. It'd be hard to coordinate. Not everybody's going to want to go at the time they're going to do that or whatever, but I think it'd be a great environment. I think it'd be something special. And you talk about people tuning in to see TV. How cool would that be to see a march through the stadium? Now, this wouldn't be totally unique in sports. I'm aware that in European cities, and even like I think the Portland Timbers or maybe the Seattle Sounders, a couple of the MLS teams have a little bit of a tradition of fans gathering and then marching their way to the stadium. But we're talking small numbers and small teams. I mean, Georgia Tech could really rally the community and the fans around that. And look, I'm not trying to build the Georgia Tech athletic department, but again, you've heard me say, I want this to be a big time rivalry. I want it to be featured. What kind of awesome TV and drama would that be if they were able to have this awesome tailgate and party experience and, get involved and make it happen? One thing I've been really proud of, and kudos to the University of Georgia, they have taken seriously the responsibility to step up the atmosphere at an already great atmosphere in Athens for game day, right? These last two night games that we've had, the Alabama game this year and then the Tech game, or the Texas game, the Ole Miss game was also a great atmosphere, and it bled, since it was a 3:30 game, it was getting dark as the game ended, but it wasn't the same atmosphere with the wristbands and the whole setup. But the university has just done a good job taking it to another level, and it just shows that's how you can build your team, your program, and your revenue. And Georgia Tech could get involved in that. They could make the home tailgate experience exciting. They could make this game exciting, even though they're selling off the rights to it to Mercedes-Benz Stadium. And it's a win-win for everybody. They get more seats. Georgia fans get more seats. They make a carnival festival parade-like atmosphere, march on Mercedes-Benz Stadium and claim it as their own. That's what they should be doing. And then take the money, pocket the money. Everybody needs the money to pay players these days. So that's my suggestion, Georgia Tech. That's what you should be doing to spice up this rivalry, get your fans fired up, and get people coming down to the North Avenue Trade School to get excited about football. So anyway, there's my little 2 cents on it. Good luck, everybody. I hope it's probably too late this year to make it work, but that's what you should be doing. So think about it. Think about it going forward. It's not a bad idea to have this game at MBS. It's not a bad idea to make it a big spectacle. Let's get the whole country in on this and get them watching our game, right? So, listen, that's all I have for today. We're a little over time now. The quarters run a little bit long. There was a lot of timeouts called right at the end. We're at 19 minutes, so we're a little over the 15-minute mark. But I thank you for participating in the new quarter format of the Daily Dawg. If you have feedback, please let me know. You can be watching the video on YouTube. You can be listening to the audio on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, wherever you find your podcast. Come to thedailydawg.com. You can find the podcast and the video podcast there, audio or video. You can leave a comment. You can email me, send a message, join the chat, anything you want to do. I don't know that I'll be running a live chat. I think there's a decent chance I might get to attend the game this week. So I will have my phone, of course, but I don't know that I'll be doing the live chat like I often do. But please give me comments. Love to hear more feedback from you. We'll be back on Friday morning with the prediction podcast, the one where we break down our true outcomes and the opportunities and what we think is going to happen. We'll break down the offenses and defenses, all that, a little bit, talk it all out. So we'll be back with that for Friday morning. Have a happy Thanksgiving, and I hope that you have much to be thankful about. Certainly, as it relates to being Georgia fans, we have a lot to be thankful about. So enjoy, happy Thanksgiving, and go Dogs.